are going to carry on, and all the pieces will fall into place. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you'll agree that there hasn't been a dull moment at this Doha Forum so far. Quite a few surprises, and we're only just getting started. Our next newsmaker interview is with the chief diplomat of a nation that has become indispensable to regional stability, a state that mediates conflicts, navigates through geopolitical rifts, and manages to balance relations between rival powers. He has steered his country into a new era of assertive, strategic, and globally engaged diplomacy. He has championed peace efforts across the region, expanding Turkey's footprint in Africa, in Europe, and the Middle East, and shaping foreign policy debates far beyond Ankara, all while emphasizing justice, reform, and stability. And he's already made his way on stage before I could finish my introduction. Good to see you, Foreign Minister. He is one of the most influential diplomats on the world stage today, and here he is, already on stage. He's also very fast. Please welcome Hakan Fidan, Turkey's Foreign Minister, who is joined by The Guardian's diplomatic editor, Patrick Wintour. Welcome to you both.
Hello, my name is Patrick Wintour from The Guardian. And I've got very strict instructions to have a very brief introduction because we're slightly short of time. And so, unless you're in the wrong room, you probably will know the gentleman opposite me is His Excellency Hakan Fidan. He's the Foreign Minister of Turkey and has had a career leading Turkish intelligence and has had a career in the military. No impressive life story has been more brutally condensed than that. But I just wanted to start with a very vivid description I found you gave of Turkey's role in the world. And it was, for the last 20-something years, a ring of fire has formed around Turkey. Blood, tears, destruction, north, south, east, everywhere. And Turkey has continued to stand like a rose garden in the middle of it. So we're going to have to venture out of the rose garden, through the ring of fire, into some of the hotspots that Turkey is incredibly influential over, and we're going to have to do it at speed. And I thought we might start with the Rose of Damascus. And it was here, obviously, a year ago that I saw a man who had the hand of history being thrown upon it as we learnt of all those developments so fast inside Syria. And I was just wondering if you could just look back and think about what was your greatest fear about what was going to happen inside Syria at that point, because everything was moving much more quickly than anyone expected. And secondly, whether some of your worst fears have been, you've overcome those, and that actually the country is on the right course.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. This is a very important question, and there is a lot to talk about Syria. I think before me, President Ahmed Ashara was here. I think he was giving the, some account of what happened, and he is a decision maker at the moment. I think he is in a better position to describe and answer certain things. However, from our perspective, you know, Syria has been a very important country for us. It's our neighbor, and we have 900 plus kilometers border with Syria, and whatever happens in Syria and Iraq immediately finds its effect in Turkey. So when the civil war started in Syria, it had huge effect in Turkey in terms of security, in terms of refugee crisis, economy, border problems, and everything else. But more importantly, Turkey is a big country. We can carry certain burdens, but the human tragedy and drama that was taking place in Syria was unbearable for us. That's why President Erdogan instructed open door policy to allow the people who were just, you know, running away from the cruel Assad regime, millions of people, unfortunately, had to leave their homes and houses. And plus, Assad was assisted by Russians, Iranians, big time. And so in 2016, 17, those years were very difficult ones. And the Western community, they came to a position where they stopped assisting Syrian opposition. And Turkey and Qatar, we were left alone in support of the Syrian opposition. And because the Americans and the West, they were advised by some circles to help PKK instead of the Syrian opposition. Anyhow, that's another story to tell.
But can I just, since we are on the PKK, can I ask you, what is your bottom line about how the SDF forces should integrate into the main Syrian army? Because there was an agreement in March, but it seems to have fallen by the wayside. I mean, is it sufficient for there to be units of the SDF to join the Syrian armed forces, or do you want individuals to join and to join as individuals?
Well, there are two parameters. One is what the Syrian government is requesting from this process, what they are actually looking at as an important security subjects. And the second thing is what Turkey sees as a proper process in terms of addressing its own security and threat assessment. Right now, we've been very consistent and insisting on describing what we want from SDF. Similarly, for the last 1 year, the Syrian government in Damascus, they are telling the SDF what they want. So for us, for instance, a couple things are very much important. SDF and Syrian government can have their own agreement because Syrian government is a sovereign government, they can have their own government. But we know that SDF, being a part of PKK, they have certain elements inside SDF who are actually solely positioned to fight against Turkey. So just to start, we want non-Syrian elements from SDF. The elements from Iraq, Iran, and Turkey should immediately leave. Should immediately leave. So that will be a good start. The second thing is all the capacity and the units which have been positioned against Turkey's interests and security should be abolished. So this is basically what we want. But they have bigger and more technical discussions with the Damascus because it is not an easy process to complete an integration of 50,000-60,000 strong armored units into a newly born army. I think this process should be conducted in good faith. They should look for the common perspective and common future. If SDF is only looking at a procedural, a symbolic process that would give the image to the entire rest of the world that they are actually engaging with integration process, in reality, they are not taking any significant steps. That would be misleading. So that's why we need a genuine engagement from both sides.
And very briefly, do you think the PKK leader with whom you're having discussions, Abdullah Öcalan, can be a force for an agreement, or do you think that he is actually prevaricating? Do you think that he can play a role in trying to bring an agreement together between Turkey and yourself?
I think he can play a role. He can play a role. You know, when I was chief of intelligence between 2009 and 13, you know, I did engage with PKK leadership in having talks and trying to reach a certain point. we came very close to reaching an understanding. Actually, we reached an understanding, but later on it was abandoned by PKK because of Syria. At that time, Abdullah Öcalan was not very much effective in stopping PKK from turning away from the agreed agreement. We are not sure. If we look at the past can repeat itself again because of exactly Syria. So that's why Syria is very critical. I believe that he can play a role. Okay. I don't know if he wants to play or he can have leverage.
Right. Last question on Syria, which is just the issue of Israel. Are you hopeful that Donald Trump is going to tell Benjamin Netanyahu to take all his troops out? Or do you think that the Americans will accept this idea of a buffer zone?
I think at some point President Trump should have a really a very substantial phone conversation with Netanyahu, because otherwise, you know, the Gaza peace plan was pioneered and owned by the Trump administration. So we helped them a lot. But if they don't intervene, I'm afraid that there is a risk of the plan that can fail, because the amount of daily violations of the ceasefire by the Israelis undescribable at the moment, and all the indicators are showing that there is a huge risk of stopping the process at the moment. That's why we need to get the President Trump. I think he's going to have a good discussion with Netanyahu.
He's due to have a discussion before the end of the year. You said earlier at the session that Turkey was ready and willing to help in terms of the International Stabilization Force. Is it true, be frank, that Israel's vetoing your involvement?
Mr. Netanyahu doesn't hide it. You know, he you know, a couple times stated openly that he doesn't want to see the Turkish troops there. But you know, the Egypt and Israel, by the provision of the UNSC resolution, should be consulted before.
And do you think there are other countries such as Indonesia that won't join the force unless Turkey is involved?
Well, they want us to be part of the ISF because they know that we can play a leading role and we can really make their life easier in terms of getting more legitimacy and support from their public. And Indonesia, Azerbaijan, and some other Muslim and Arab countries that we are working closely, and this is what they want to see for their troops to be sent.
When you said earlier that you thought the task of the ISF needed to focus on the issue of the divide between Israel and basically along the yellow line, what do you mean? What do you think the first thing the ISF should do? It feels like you're saying that disarmament is not the first priority.
Well, as I was telling, you know, we have to be very much realistic. I mean, what we need first and foremost is the stop war between Palestinians and the Israelis. And that's why we need ISF to separate Israelis and Palestinians on the borderline, not to let them each other to attack. So this is what we see as the primary way to stop the war, or not to allow the war start again. But we shouldn't expect from ISF a work that has not been completed by the Israeli security forces. There are other provisions in the peace plan for the security and safety and the policing of Gaza and administration of Gaza. So once we can secure the borderline between two forces and two sides, and then we can address the other issues inside Gaza. You know, Israel shouldn't threaten Gaza, and Gaza in no way shouldn't threaten Israel. And we need to get the police force on track. We need to get Palestinian administration on track. We need to get Hamas hand over the administration to the Palestinian committee. And then, most importantly, we need to get the peace, Board of Peace to work.
Sure. You're very close or understand what the leadership of Hamas want. There seem to be two issues. One is whether they should disarm to a Palestinian body or whether they can disarm to a foreign force. And secondly, whether you can get full disarmament straight away or whether there has to be political conditions beforehand. Can you just explain where you feel Hamas are psychologically, mentally about this issue of disarmament?
Well, as I said, that cannot be the first thing to do in the process. I mean the disarming. We need to put things in proper order. We have to be realistic. That's what I am saying. I am not avoiding any problem. I am not hiding anything away. But what I am telling is, if we want to really succeed we have to be realistic. We need to get ISF to deploy on border side. We need to get Palestinian forces, police forces. Then gradually, first, we should take over the administration. We should take over the policing from Hamas. Then we need to let the humanitarian assistance freely go into Gaza. We should let the normal life, give hope to people. Then we can start addressing the commissioning issue.
That sounds to me like you would leave it quite far to the back of the queue, and that is simply something Israel's not going to tolerate, is it? I mean, is that not going to be a real problem in the very early on?
It's understandable. That's why we will have ISF in place. Different than the previous scenarios, we will have ISF, we will have non-Hamas police force in place, and most importantly, the regional countries and the countries who have put their signature and peace declaration in Sharm el-Sheikh, Turkey, Qatar, Egypt, and the other countries, members of Arab League and Organization of Islamic Countries, they are going to be enforcing one way or another if Israel is following the agreement till the letter. Hamas and any other Palestinian faction can deviate itself from the implementation of the peace plan as long as all the parties are observing it. They shouldn't be, because we would be the first party who would be coming against this.
Just can I ask you about this issue of momentum? The Norwegian Prime Minister was here earlier and he said that unless there is announcements about the Board of Peace, about the technocratic body, maybe about the ISF as well, before Christmas, there is going to be a real sense of loss of momentum and that the violence inside Gaza could become worse. Can you give any kind of reassurance that there are announcements imminent? I saw you did an interview maybe 2-3 weeks ago in which you said the technocratic body is ready, all the names are out there in terms of it's been agreed. Why not start showing there is some momentum? We don't even know who is going to be, whether Tony Blair is going to be on the Board of Peace or who's going to be on the Board of Peace.
Well, I think one of the practical problems about this subject is, as everybody knows, that the people on the US side who are in charge of mediation of Gaza file, they are also in charge of mediating between Ukraine and Russia.
You mean they've got other things on their plate, other things on their mind?
No,
this Would it not be better to have a larger State Department?
This is up to them. But right now, I've been, communicating and discussing with Steve Witkoff and other friends and Marco Rubio. They are very, very aware of the gravity of the problem at the moment, because if they don't intervene timely, there is a risk of what you are saying, actually. They also understand this risk. So they know that they need to intervene timely to make sure that we can go into second phase. Otherwise, we can lose momentum, because Hamas has almost delivered what they've been asked. in terms of releasing the hostages and the bodies on
there is one dead hostage.
Yeah, they are still looking for.
Yes.
Yeah.
You are cast in the role of guarantor of this peace, and yet there have been 360 Palestinians killed since the ceasefire. There is not enough aid going in, or not at the right amounts or into the right places. Do you not worry that at some point you end up cast in the role of guarantor of a continuing lower grade genocide, but it's still a genocide?
Well, first of all, let me make a technical correction. In none of the papers we've been described or appointed as the guarantors. We are the signatories to the statement, together with other 3 countries, US, us, Qatar, and Egypt. Having said that, we don't mind being a guarantor. We don't mind shouldering the responsibilities of the guarantor country. So you're right in pointing out that the daily violation is giving the image that the peace process, the ceasefire, can stop anytime because nobody seems to be stopping Israel. Well, this is exactly the problem that we've been having right from the beginning of the war. In the absence of any credible power in the field or any other mechanism or structure, nobody has used power leverage against Israel at the moment. Only United States were able to stop Israel, and only a certain amount of countries coming together to convince the American administrations. This is a chain reaction here. We talk to Americans, Americans talk to Israelis because they understand the gravity of the problem. Because if you leave things Israeli and Netanyahu alone, they have only one thing in their mind: to get Gaza free of all the Palestinian people. They have 2 methodologies. Either they will turn entire Gaza into an unlivable place, so they can ship off the rest of the Palestinian people elsewhere, so they can dislocate all of them, or just as they were doing, they will continue to kill the entire Palestinian population.
Sure. There is a revived campaign to secure the release of Marwan Barghouti, and many people say that if he was released, it would be quite transformatory for Palestinian politics. His son tweeted yesterday, I think yesterday morning, that he'd been told by a released prisoner that his father had been physically crushed. They broke his teeth and his ribs, cut off part of his ear, and broke his fingers in stages for amusement. And he then said, "What do I do? Where do we turn? Lord, have mercy." Are you worried that there could be what's been described as a Navalny solution to Marwan Barghouti, that he would be killed in jail? And what are we to do about this?
Well, unfortunately, not only him, but also countless of thousands of Palestinian prisoners, male and female, they've been subject to torture of Israel, unfortunately, for the last couple of years. And this has been a systematic one. Well, as international community, we need to do something about this too. Not only we have to work to save the people in Gaza, but also we have to address this very problem that you are describing. This is a humanitarian tragedy. Unfortunately, nobody is paying much attention that needed. We have to do everything in our power, because the torture has become systemic. Because for Israelis, this is an act of revenge, torturing the Palestinian prisoners in prison. Some decent Israeli people, they are disclosing all these things. Their conscience is not okay with what's going on. So only this way we know that this is taking place in a very systematic way.
You don't really have any practical solution to this, though. I mean, because it is Barghouti, if he is killed, it would be I think, very devastating to Palestinian politics, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. But as I said, this is the way that Israelis are doing killing business and torturing business, and they know that the international community is helpless in stopping them using force. But there are other things that international community can do easily, and that's what we've been trying to do for the last 2 years. You know, in all the capitals, when you see the people, the youth, everybody is protesting against the Israeli genocide. And the countries, their numbers are increasing in recognition of the Palestinian statehood.
Yes.
And we see that the Palestinian cause is gaining ground, but at the same time, the degree of brutality is also increasing. So I think Mr. Netanyahu is really harming in a very bad way the future of Israel and Israeli state. So
okay,
it should stop.
The clock is being very brutal to me, and I just wanted to ask you two last things. One was about Ukraine. You said you were I think your words were scary, what was been happening in terms of attacks on shipping close to Turkey, and that you were going to have conversations with the Ukrainians about this. They've denied responsibility for some of these attacks. Are you satisfied now that the Ukrainians are not going to be attacking shipping close to Turkey, and that there's going to be a
we have
toning down?
No, we have discussed about this subject with our Ukrainian friends, and not only the Ukrainians, we also communicated the same concerns with the Russian side as well. We just talked to their ambassador, and I talked to my counterparts on both capitals about the subject, because this is very sensitive for us. We don't want to see the trade routes are being targeted and the trade ships being hit. This is exactly what we were concerned right from the beginning, because this is an escalation of war by geography and by a different methodology.
Last question, which is, in this national security strategy, which the Americans published slightly strangely on Thursday night, and this is relevant to you because I think Turkey hosts the NATO summit next year, there's a passage which says, over the long term, it is more than plausible that within a few decades at the latest, certain NATO members will become majority non-European. As such, it's an open question whether they will view their place in the world or their alliance with the United States in the same way as those who signed the NATO Charter. I don't know what he means, or the American Secretary of State means by majority non-European, but it might be code for Muslim. What's your reaction to reading words like that? The idea that somebody's majority non-European doesn't have loyalty to NATO.
Well, I don't know what you have understood, but my understanding is that because I might be biased because of the discussions on the NATO circles, because within NATO Ministerial Committee, there is a discussion about EU and non-EU NATO members. Yeah. When we say non-EU NATO members, it comprises United States, us, UK, Norway, and...
Well, the phrase is used as European, not EU. So I think we know what it means, surely.
Yeah. Well, this must be an introduction and new discussion into NATO circles, because we've been having this discussion, EU and non-EU NATO members, because EU is about the, EU is always coming up with new ideas to form its own security architecture, whereas NATO says, we have NATO here, almost all EU members are NATO members, you don't need to have a separate security architecture.
Look, thank you so much. I've overshot by a little way, and you can return to the Rose Garden.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I wish we had more time.
Me too.
Thank you very much, Minister Fidan. Thank you for your valuable insights and for sharing with us your perspectives on what needs to be done to solve one of the world's most intractable crises, which has not only chipped away at the human rights of Palestinians, but our own moral credibility, Palestine. And thank you, of course, to Patrick for steering this conversation in a way that I know will have resonated with so many people here today. Time now for a quick coffee break. Our last chance to get our caffeine fix before we meet back here in just a few minutes to resume with a panel discussion entitled Humanity's Next Chapter, Innovation and Impact from the Global South, where we look at how the world's economic and creative centers are shifting and how the Global South is emerging as a key player. So we'll see you back here in just a few minutes.